You know, there's like a perception of most light novel protagonists being incredibly generic. I think what most people mean by that is that most light novel protagonists are teenagers and also usually kinda average. For me, there's enough differences between seemingly generic light novel protagonists to tell them all apart, but I've also read a lot of light novels, so I think my perception is skewed. I never had a problem with isekai or power fantasies in general, so I don't really have a hate boner for your run-of-the-mill reincarnated office worker with omnipotent abilities and a perpetual harem machine. As a matter of fact, I like that stuff. It kind of falls in the same category as campy horror movies for me. You know, it's just stuff that has very little stakes, is familiar, and easy to get through. If you're wondering how I can possibly love something like generic isekai protagonists, well, let's just say that when I'm not reading light novels, I am reading very depressing literature. You know, McCarthy, Faulkner, Borges, Pessoa, Camus, Mishima, Hemingway, the usual suspects. And none of those dudes knew about therapy or talking about your feelings. So let's just say every time I finish a book by any of them, I feel myself spiraling into an endless abyss of nihilism. So in my world of decrepit but nuanced literary authors, the generic isekai protagonist is like a breath of fresh air. So simple and straightforward. You know exactly what you're getting. The good guys and bad guys are clear-cut, and the goals and stakes are tangible. Now, I'm not saying any of this to lecture anyone. From the outside looking in, it's easy to see why people might think all light novel protagonists are just slightly different versions of Kirito. I mean, even in real life, the older you get, the more most teenagers start to look the same. People might just not want to read about an angsty teen for the 100th time, and I understand that, but I did want to just briefly address the fact that it is perfectly fine to enjoy generic protagonists. The reason I brought up all those authors isn't because I wanted to look like an insufferable literature snob, it's because I wanted to show that it is possible to read a dense southern gothic book about cowboys scalping innocent people, descending into a sadistic power trip that increasingly gives power to the concept of violence personified, and then go and read like Danmachi or something and have just as much fun with that. So, with that long-winded generic protagonist PSA out of the way, let's give you Weary Souls a hand and recommend some light novels with more unique protagonists. Be warned, I'm not saying these protagonists are more nuanced or complex. They're just different enough to feel like a breath of fresh air. Let's get started with the DILF. Belgrave, for My Daughter Left the Nest and Returned an S-Rank Adventurer, is one of two protagonists. His daughter is the other one, and he's a dad. Yeah, a dad. That's literally like his superpower. He's strong because he's a dad, he's smart because he's a dad, and also mature because he's a dad. He finds a baby in the woods, then she grows up and becomes an adventurer, and then he becomes a pseudo-dad for her orphan best friends. Then he adopts a little girl who was the leader of a cult and her sidekick. Then he adopts a demon. Yeah. He's a dad, alright. He's everyone's dad. What I love most about Belgrave is that he's not an anime dad. He isn't just a nice dude who is nice to his daughter for the sake of cute scenes. He's constantly thinking about how he's raising her, and he has his own goals and aspirations he starts to pursue again once his daughter becomes independent. Basically, you take an earnest fantasy light novel protagonist, you age him up to like 40, and you send him out on an adventure. Which means he never fully sets out on an adventure at all, because he's a grown-ass man with responsibilities. Instead, he goes to visit his daughter in the big city, stays home to help out with the farming, and maybe occasionally fights some enemies. There's a lot of thought put into making sure he acts his age. Like, he literally has to change his sword style because his body just can't keep up with more aggressive moves anymore. There's also a nice contrast between him and his daughter, because the book is split between her classic fantasy adventures, his mostly laid-back life, and then when they meet up, it becomes a combination of the two. If you're looking to get as far away from teenage angst as possible, I think Belgrave is a good choice. Let's keep the mature hunk theme going and go with Lauren from The Strange Adventure of a Broke Mercenary. So now we're going from DILF to himbo because, he literally is just a himbo. He's smart when it comes to mercenary business, but clueless about everything else. And most of his acquaintances legitimately think he's a gigolo because he's constantly borrowing money from his partner, who is a demon priest girl with artificial limbs that is keeping him in debt on purpose so she can keep stringing him along on her quest to find her real limbs. So basically, a body cop duo. If Belgrave is your standard fantasy adventure protagonist aged up to around 40, Lauren is the rowdy but good-hearted mercenary the protagonist of a fantasy story would eventually recruit into their party. Except, instead of getting recruited by a good-hearted protagonist, he gets manipulated and gaslit by a demon priest who wants to use his superhuman strength. There's not much to say about Lauren because, yeah, he really is just dumb, strong guy who is a good person at heart. Of course, his personality works best when he's interacting with the demon girl, since their whole shtick is that he's imposing but dumb and kind, and she's cute but selfish and cunning. They're also both grown as adults, so there's not much hesitation, shyness, or misunderstandings between the two, which definitely keeps things from becoming a frustrating will they won't they romance. Now, let's break the fantasy streak and go right into historical mysteries with Mao Mao from the Apothecary Diaries. Mao Mao is actually hard to describe now that I'm thinking about it. She loves her job and is willing to perform extreme acts of self-harm for her experiments. She tasted so much poison she's immune to most of it, and it's become a culinary delicacy for her. And she grew up in a brothel, so she's pretty disillusioned with romantic relationships. Overall, she's just fun to watch. She'll be sure to stick her nose where it doesn't belong or throw sassy remarks at people she's annoyed by. She does have a lots of nuance, but there's no way to talk about it without going into big spoilers. So let me just, list some examples of funny things she does. Mao Mao gets mad at an attendant for poisoning her master, so she slaps her around, drags her by the hair, and forces her to wear the poison makeup. A soldier asks Mao Mao if one of her sisters from the brothel would want to marry him, so she makes him strip down to his underwear to evaluate his muscles. She is stopped before she can check his dick size. Mao Mao gets imprisoned in a pit full of poisonous snakes, and she eats most of them. Yeah, she's just really fun to read about. You know, she's just the classic unhinged girls get it done protagonist. She gets it done, but she gets it done in very unconventional ways. I should also cut in right here and say that if all you're looking for in a protagonist is for them to not be stereotypical light novel guy, your quickest solution would be to read literally anything with a female lead. Ascendance of a Bookworm, Inept Villainess, Kuma Kuma Bear, literally anything. Now, I know people don't want to hear about teenage protagonists. Actually, I don't know if I realized I just made that up, that people don't like teenage protagonists. But I hate teenagers, so I'm just gonna keep going with the assumption that other people do as well, alright? But, okay, so people don't want to hear about teenage protagonists, but hear me out for this one, alright? Let's talk about Tomosaki from bottom tier character Tomozaki-kun. This is the gray area. So you look at the covers and it's all cute girls. Then the premise is, loser guy gets taught by popular girl how to be popular. And you're immediately like, oh, it's one of these. No. It's not. Alright, so the series starts with him meeting someone online who turns out to be the popular girl, right? When she sees him, she's like, yuck. Bye. Then he gets mad and is about to go on a rant on how she has it so easy. But before he can, she's like, dude, you didn't bother showering, your hair's a mess, your clothes suck dick, and you like hunched over and not making eye contact. You're not even at the starting line, so fuck off with all that. So then you might be like, oh, so he's just gonna assimilate with the normies. The series is telling you to conform to society. No. Tomosaki from Tomozaki-kun would be a stereotypical rom-com teenager if he didn't have balls of steel. Like, there's literally tension between him and the girl a couple times, because when she asks him to get rid of his autonomy for the sake of popularity, he's like, no, I bet I can get this shit done while sticking to my own values. And then he goes and does it, and you cheer him on when he does. Tomosaki is so good because he's willing to put the stuff we've seen him painfully build from the ground up on the line when it's time to stand up for himself or someone else. Like, this dude goes through torture for introverts. He has to become friends with a hot popular girl. He has to participate in class events and discussions. He has to go on a summer trip with hot popular people. He has to ask for people's contact information. He has to put up with the vitriol that is typical of teenagers. People telling him he's a loser trying to assimilate into the popular group. People still ignoring him despite his best efforts. People asking his hot popular friends why they're hanging out with him. And then when something happens and the girl is like, back off dude, stay low or you'll destroy the little reputation you built up, he's like, no, I'm a gamer, I'll get it done. And yes, that last part is for real. He does kind of technically say that. This dude is literally slotted into the stereotypical romantic comedy protagonist and is like, nah, don't think so. His whole existence is an immaculate balance between putting in effort for the sake of building up social skills and connections and knowing exactly when you should value your own individuality and values over that kind of stuff. And he's a gamer. What more could you ask for? Alright, that's it. I was gonna add one more, and then I realized I've never done a proper top 10, so why should I do a proper top 5, right? Yeah, there's just a couple here. I might make another video like this one, right? I just kind of need... I realize how hard it is to talk about protagonists without talking about the story surrounding them, right, when I was writing this. And I was like, oh shit, I have to talk about this story. And if I talk about the story, I literally could just make a video for each of these, right? Because there's so much to say about all of these. So yeah, I decided, you know what, I'll just do a couple of them. Hopefully, you know, you like them. Hopefully you haven't read at least some of these. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys a lot for your time. And you know, if you have recommendations of maybe not so stereotypical protagonists, feel free to talk about them. I'll link my AniList, I guess, just so you can look at whatever light novel is ranked high on my AniList. Will probably have unique protagonists, so you can just go based on that. All right, that's it. Later. Bye.